Hi, welcome to Pauline Interviews. This is part 2 of interviewing Julia Ingram. Julia is a hypnotherapist, she's a counselor, she does workshops, she's a teacher. And in part 2, Julia authored 3 books, and we're going to talk briefly about the first 2, and then we're going to focus on her last one, which is absolutely fascinating. I'll let Julia tell you the names of the books because they're really long. Your titles. Well, your first one was?
The Messengers, a true story of angelic presence and a return to the age of miracles.
That sounds good. That sounds wonderful. We need miracles nowadays.
I was telling you during our break how grateful I am to have been a part of that, the creation of that book. It changed my life, and I know that it has impacted thousands of people.
Just briefly, how did it change your life? Just briefly.
Well, I was raised in the Mormon church, and by the time I was an adult, that religion just did not work for me. Mm-hmm. We're way too male dominated. There was really no place for women except as helpers. And this is the 60s. I'm a feminist, and I still am, and could just not hang with that religion anymore. So, as a lot of people do, when you rebel or you move away, I threw everything out. Mm-hmm. And that the real name of that religion is the Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter-day Saints, and Jesus got thrown out with everything else. And I looked at other religions, but the feminine is really not present in very many of them.
No. The Pope's never been a woman.
No, well, there may be Pope Joan, but that's a little side story.
Another interview I see coming on.
Yeah. Now I've lost my train of thought.
Oh, you were saying that most religions are mostly male-dominated. There's no room for women.
Oh, how did the Messengers change me? Okay, so I had no idea what I was getting myself into when Laurie McQuarrie and Nick Bunick and I sat down for coffee. But she said to me, "What would you say if we told you he's the reincarnation of Paul the Apostle?"
That Nick is?
Nick.
Did Laurie take him back to? I've interviewed Laurie several times.
Yeah. So his first experience was with Laurie. Well, not the first psychic he worked with, but Laurie took him in hand and said, "Let's get you going on what you came to do." So, destiny is a mysterious thing. But here, after rejecting everything that I was raised with, they bring back to me the story of Paul the Apostle and his relationship with Jesus. And it was a very authentic and moving experience to sit with that man throughout that whole story and that life. And I fell in love with Paul, and I fell in love with Joshua. Mm-hmm. And I had a very different picture of those times than I was taught. Although I have to say that picture that was in my Sunday school of Jesus with the children around.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Right.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
The sweetness of that story. So I found my way back to what I think a lot of us New Agers call Christ consciousness.
Yes.
And that book was a New York Times bestseller.
I know, I read that. That is great.
It's awesome to be able to
Your first book. Your first book's like winning an Academy Award in your first movie. That's terrific.
So I get to put that on my books now, and that gets me a little extra attention, and I'm very grateful for that.
And your second book was?
Well, and so here's what happened.
Oh, okay.
Following the Messengers, my phone is ringing off the hook. And people are reading that book and saying, "I resonate with that book. I think I was there too."
Wow.
So
people from all over the country, all over the world?
Well, eventually all over the world.
Oh, amazing.
And the phone calls I was getting for women, it was like, okay, that's the men's story. That's the disciples, the guys, the dudes. But what about the women? So...
But when you say, what about the women? Were they women in those past lives, or were they men now if they're women?
Well, the Messengers was definitely a male
Yes.
Male story. The women were mentioned, but there were you know, just like in my religion,
Yeah.
they were side, they were helpers, they were the ladies who did the dishes.
Yeah. The people in the background.
So, this is what happened to me as part of Destiny, is I think the women started coming to me and telling their stories. So book number 2 is The Lost Sisterhood. This is the return of Mary Magdalene, the Mother Mary, and other holy women. So it's a sequel to The Messengers, and a balance of the feminine to the masculine.
And now the third one I'm really fascinated with, I don't think people can see it, but it's called Born Sacred.
No.
Or Born Scared. I keep calling it sacred because we're into the spiritual. I'm sorry, Born Scared. I'm afraid I don't remember the title.
It could be that I made a mistake, so I wanted a dark blue font, and so I think when you first look at it, it does perhaps look scared.
Yeah, I think, you know, what your brain does is get lazy and you just, but it's Born Scared when anxiety was created. Now this is interesting, in the womb, remember this, at birth, or in prior lifetimes. So why did you start this? I mean, what gave you the impetus to do this third book?
I was reading a book by a holistic psychiatrist, Dr. Hunt, and in the introduction to his book, he starts to explain anxiety. It comes from a traumatic event, you know, a loss, a fright, something like that, and he says, you know, granted, some people just are born anxious, but we don't know why. And then that was the last
We don't know why.
And it's like, I have some pretty good ideas why. And boy, within 15 minutes, sitting down, I outlined 13 chapters. Just like came to me.
Wow. Now when we're scared, not born scared, but when we're scared, you had mentioned that some of the reasons could be like the media today. Everything is immediate. I mean, we can see war on television, we hear about violence all the time. This is part of the anxiety we're facing today, isn't it? This would be something that's current.
Well, yes and no. I think that the bigger problem is that anxious people are having children.
Oh.
So, you'll watch the news and
Yes.
you don't necessarily get anxious about it.
I don't get anxious, no I don't. It doesn't scare me. What I do get is I get very sad.
Yeah.
It actually affects me emotionally, depending on what it is. If it's about
Yeah.
a child being hurt or injured, I may go several days, I may even cry. So I don't think that's a good energy either. I carry a sadness with me, so
it's not a good energy.
I need to learn how to release that. But I don't let it scare me because
Yeah.
I don't want to live scared.
And I think that is true for most adults, is that we have the capacity to detach from it, put it in perspective and context. So I don't blame the media so much for this huge rise in anxiety in the country, as much as I think we're just not looking at where it's coming from, because there are some things we could do if we really knew where it was coming from.
2 questions. Where's it coming from? What can we do?
Yeah, good. So I'm not talking about all anxiety, because Dr. Hunt's right. I mean, some anxiety does come. If you're burglarized, you're gonna be fearful.
Or you were a singer and I'm a singer. Sometimes I get a little nervous getting on stage.
fright,
Yeah,
yeah.
stage
So
fright.
so
Those
there
are
are
just
things that happen
common.
to us that cause anxiety.
Yeah. But they come and go.
That's right. That's right. So this book is really directed towards people who feel like they were born scared. They'll say, I just been scared my whole life. I was an anxious kid. You know, my parents dragged me from here to there. So I start with a story of a young woman who actually came to one of my trainings to become a past life regression therapist. And it was her turn to be the subject in a practice, and she started to panic. So the student who was practicing being a hypnotist had come over. She doesn't think she can do this, and she was like crouched under the blanket and just panicky. So I asked her at the break what was going on, and she agreed that I could use her as an example.
She was afraid to go back to past life?
She was afraid to be hypnotized.
Oh, okay.
She couldn't even get down the stairs we used just to go deeper. So as soon as she went inside and started experiencing being internal, she started to panic. Well, she paid a lot of money for this class, and she was like determined to get through it, so she said yes, we can be subject. Well, and this is what I do, you go into hypnotic trance and instruct the client to go to the source of the problem. Brian Weiss says this in Many Lives, Many Masters too, and in his many books, that's the key. You just tell the subconscious mind, go to the source of the problem.
You're addressing that, of course, in hypnosis, we should clarify that we're not dealing with the conscious mind, we're dealing with the subconscious mind, which is a completely different animal.
Which is got a lot more information.
Yeah.
Some of it very useful, is a lot of crap.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of crap in the unconscious. So what she went to, where the source of her major panic was in her 9th month of gestation. So she's still in her mother's womb. Her parents are at a party. There's a commotion outside. Dad decides to go out and investigate. Mom goes with. They think the rest of the party's coming as well, but they didn't. There's a big fight going on outside. Dad gets into the middle of it. He is stabbed multiple times, screaming, mother's screaming, and baby's there. Baby's present in the womb. So mother's hormones are like toxic. The baby's got her own stress hormones, so she's trapped in that womb and trapped in that traumatic event. And then that gets repressed. So all that's
she was
left
born.
is
The mother wasn't murdered, but she had the baby.
The father wasn't murdered. He actually survived, but he was seriously hurt. Mom observed. Mom was there. So this all comes out in that very first hypnosis.
She never knew about her past. Did she know about this?
She knew later.
Okay.
She was told as a teenager that happened, but she never put together.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't think so. I would think I'm not born yet.
Because Mom and Dad were fine.
Yeah, and I wasn't born, so I wasn't around. Technically, she wasn't around. I mean, she was, but physically.
People don't think we remember what happened in the womb. I am here to tell you, we remember a lot. We hear a lot. We can hear voices in the womb. We can pick up conversation in the womb.
What mothers should be really, they should be conscious of, what they're eating, not only what they're eating, but how they're feeling, their environment. Some people listen to really soothing music. So you have to prepare the baby before it even comes. Isn't that true? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So once we found what happened, how that was impacting her, then she was able to start to work on it. Before that, she believed the world was a dangerous place.
So she was afraid of everything.
And acted like that. Yeah, she said when she was little, she was bracing for someone to come in and hurt her.
And consciously she didn't know why.
She didn't know why.
No.
So her parents worried about her, constantly worried about her.
They never put two and two together.
They didn't.
Well, nobody thinks, in those days, nobody thought about.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. So what kind of steps did you do after she found it? You always go to the source, and once you find out the reason, then what do you do to heal?
First, we had to update the baby, because the baby is still trapped in
So you have to go back.
We touch in. We don't stay long, but we touch in just to get the baby. And then, imagine, I had the client, the student, imagine bringing the baby into present time. And I asked the question, how's Mom? Mom's fine. How's Dad? Dad's fine. Baby didn't know that. Baby was still, the preborn part of her was still trapped in the traumatic event.
Yeah.
So just updating was, step one, and very useful. And then imagining flushing out the toxin, getting rid of the traumatic chemicals in her body, and then bringing the baby home with her.
Your mind can heal, can do amazing things.
Yes. Yeah.
Just for interest, could you tell us about some, of course not mentioning any names, some really interesting case studies? Like, I don't think I have any phobias, but some people, I don't like being underwater for too long because I'm not a real good swimmer, but I don't think it's a phobia. But some people don't like to be, my sister won't go in an elevator, My
Yeah.
husband doesn't like to be up high, although he goes up high, so I don't think it's a phobia, but people that can't go up high or can't
Yeah.
be in enclosed spaces or things like that, that could be a takeover from a previous life or a bring over.
You know what, Pauline, we think all phobias came from traumatic past life events.
All of them?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why mainstream psychiatry calls them irrational,
Because they don't go back.
because they,
Yeah, irrational fears.
Irrational. And I think that is wrong. And
How
I
could,
think
how
it's-
could a fear be irrational? If you're feeling it, it's there. I don't understand, to me it's an oxymoron.
Yeah, I don't like it, and that's the official definition, is an
Uh-huh.
irrational fear. Yeah, I have never worked with anybody who has a phobia that didn't go to a past life. I mean, you don't call it a phobia if, the example I use is if your drunk Uncle Charlie decided to teach you how to swim when you're, like a little kid by dropping you into the deep end of the pool.
That's.
You might have a fear of water.
Yeah,
But that's not a phobia, because
No.
you know where it came from, and you can probably get through it if you take swimming lessons from
Mhm.
somebody else.
I understand that example, yeah.
So
Mhm.
phobias are actually quite easy to cure, because we go to the source,
Mhm.
find it, update the information, see
Does-
where it came from. It doesn't belong in this lifetime.
Does a person have to believe in a past life to go through a therapy and heal?
Well, it's helpful.
It's helpful, but yeah.
If you have a mindset that it's
Mhm.
possible, then your left brain is not saying, I'm making this up, this isn't
Yeah.
true, this,
Yeah. I like when I asked you the difference, because I never heard that before. That was fascinating, the last interview we did. So.
Imagining versus remembering.
Right,
Uh-huh.
right. So what types of phobia have you been treating? And your book is basically about that, right? Basically about.
No, there's one chapter on phobias.
On phobias, okay,
Uh-huh.
but it's more the anxiety created in the womb at birth, so very young on and then past lives.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is maybe one or two of the phobias that you found interesting that you were able to help your client?
I love the story of a preteen, I think she was preteen, who had a bug and snake phobias.
A bug and snake.
Bugs and snakes.
Snakes, yeah.
And we're in Oregon. She wanted to go to Camp West Wind for 2 weeks or something like that with her friends. And I think she'd gone the year before, but she saw a snake, and that was the end of that. Just a little ordinary snake. We don't have poisonous snakes.
Not this part.
At the coast. But tiny little snake zipped by her, and that was the end of that. She was too scared to go. And her mother described that if it was a tiny little bug in the ribs, like she freaks out. So they wondered if hypnotherapy would help.
Were they open to past lives, or they
Yeah.
just, oh, okay.
Yeah. And the child had heard about it as well, so she was open as well. Although kids are like, whatever.
Yeah, they haven't been prejudiced yet,
Right.
hopefully.
So let me see if I can remember that. So she accessed 4 past lives, all relevant to snakes and bugs. I'm not sure I can remember all of them anymore, it takes 2 years to get a book.
And you have so many clients.
Yeah, but the one about bugs was the grossest. And that was a past life when she was a little boy, before you just walk to places or took a horse in Europe somewhere. Take your uncle some food or your grandfather some food. And the guy had been dead for quite a few days.
Oh, I think I know what the picture is.
Yeah, so,
I can
the
picture it.
bugs are everywhere,
Yeah,
so
oh.
just walking into the room, squish, squish,
oh,
squish,
oh.
seeing the bugs coming
Oh.
from the dead body and all of that. That created the bug phobia.
Mhm.
The snake phobia was a past life where she was frightened by a snake, ran into a pole and had a brain,
Oh.
just died from that.
Oh.
And another one where her brother was killed by a python.
Oh.
And then she got weird and kind of
Yeah.
mentally ill around snakes.
Oh, yeah.
And finally died by suicide.
Oh.
And then some more moving
Oh.
And the 4th one was, she was a deep sea diver,
Mhm.
and she was startled by what you call a whole bunch of eels.
Mhm. They look like
I was gonna say
snakes.
pack of eels, but that isn't right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they,
School, maybe a school.
yeah, oh,
Uh-huh.
okay, that sounds right. That frightened her, and she died
Mhm.
underwater
Drowned.
from that
Mhm.
fear. So those 4 past lives
They were pretty
were
gruesome.
Yeah, and unlike your friend you
Yeah.
described in the earlier interview, who
Yeah.
was very emotional,
Yeah.
most people are actually not emotional, they're quite detached.
Right, they're
and
detached.
just-
Do you tell them to get detached? Do you tell them to reserve?
I
Uh-huh.
don't unless they do,
Mhm.
unless they're freaking out so much that they're uncomfortable, then I have them do that.
We just have about a minute, but I want to ask you just a couple really quick questions with brief answers. What age, how young can a person be to go through hypnotherapy? Do you see more men than women? And how many sessions do you need? Do you remember those?
Yeah, I've worked with, I think 7 and up.
Okay, and men, women, more women?
Many more women than men.
Many more women, because they're more open?
I don't know.
And
I
how
don't
many
know.
sessions?
More women than men go into
Yeah.
therapy, period.
Oh, because, yeah, I get
Uh-huh.
that. And how many sessions, would it vary?
From 1 to 20 or 30.
Oh, wow, okay. And the last question, and I think this is important, are you finding people more open to it? Are people getting more spiritually conscious? You know, is this consciousness of spirituality increasing? There were people getting at least more open to the idea of reincarnation or past lives?
I believe that that's true.
Yeah.
I think that we had this huge peak in the mid-90s, and that may have settled down a little bit. So I would say that it's probably not as interesting to people right now.
Right
It
now,
seems to
okay,
have
yeah,
receded a bit.
yeah. And I saw some TV shows that weren't necessarily past lives, but, you know, like The Medium and a few others based on,
Yeah.
you know, the Ghost, what I forget it was called, The Ghost Whisperer or something like that. So I've seen TV shows that are more mind expanding or open.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think, you know, if you
Yeah.
think about tides coming in
Yeah,
and
tides
out,
going,
I
yeah.
think the tide went way out, and
Yeah.
I think it's beginning to come back in.
Come back in, yeah, that's good to know.
Uh-huh.
Well, we definitely have to do more interviews, I have so many more questions, I didn't even look at the ones I prepared, that's because you're so good. Thanks, Jill, you're fascinating, you're a wonderful person to talk to and to interview, keep up your good work.
So I want to say that
Yeah.
if people want to buy
Oh, yes,
the
please,
books.
thanks for reminding me, yes, to get your latest book, Born Scared, and also you have a CD, and what is the CD?
This is self-hypnosis for help with anxiety
Okay.
and fears.
Go to your website,
Go to my website, juliaingram.com.
Julia Ingram, and that's INGRAM, and you should know Julia.com. Thanks for watching Pauline Interviews.